If you're like me, you're a bit overwhelmed by all of the teeth whitening products on the market. And our next sponsor has provided us with some very interesting facts we would like to pass on to you.
Fact number 1, teeth whitening does not whiten your teeth. It removes the stains and restores the tooth to its natural color. Natural color is vary per person, but for most, it's an off-white or slightly yellowish undertone.
Fact 2, teeth whitening does not damage teeth, but it does temporarily dehydrate. When dehydrated, the pores in the enamel are open and exposed. Open pores invite acids and sugars, which, as we all know, lead to tooth decay. Avoid or minimize acidic and sugary substances for at least 24 hours after whitening. Also avoid staining substances, as the teeth are more susceptible to restaining during this period.
Fact number 3, tooth sensitivity is a result of tooth dehydration. When the pores of the enamel are open, the teeth become dehydrated, exposing the nerve to the elements. As the tooth rehydrates, the sensitivity will dissipate. To accelerate the rehydration and curb sensitivity, use a post-whitening application known as remineralization or desensitizing gel.
Fact 4, caps and veneers cannot be whitened because they do not have pores for the stains to latch to. Prior to having dental work, you should whiten your teeth, restoring them to their natural color, as the dentist will be color matching to your current shade.
Fact number 5, the key to teeth whitening is the delivery device. So long as a whitening product is a peroxide-based whitener, it will remove the stains. What differentiates one product from the other is a device that holds the whitening agent to the tooth without interruption.
Whitening strips neglect the crevices and molars, and they slide on your teeth.
Saliva floods the generic trays because they're bulky and they don't create a seal.
Oh, and you likely did not know this, but LED lights are novelty items that add no benefit. You need a high output UV light only found at the dentist. Don't fall for the gimmick. If you insist on a light that does not work, get one on Amazon for under $5.
The number 1 whitening device recommended by dentists is a custom fitted tray. You can have your dentist make your trays for $300 to $600, or you could head on over to smilebrilliant.com and use their lab direct mail-in process for a fraction of the price you'd pay at the dentist. And if you're like me, and you grind your teeth at night, you can also purchase Smile Brilliant's custom fitted night guards. Once again, for a fraction of the price dentists charge.
Once again, that's www.smilebrilliant.com and use coupon code AGATHA, AGATHA, for an exclusive All About Agatha discount. Welcome to All About Agatha, the podcast dedicated to reading and ranking every single mystery novel written by the Queen of Crime, Dame Agatha Christie. I'm Kemper Donovan.
I'm Catherine Broback.
And this is one of those happy episodes that we have once a year in fall when we very much focus on the ranking aspect of our podcast, which we do always include in our little intro at the beginning of every episode. That's right, folks. We are going to be talking about the state of the rankings.
I wonder if there's going to be anything that we're going to be fighting about here, Kemper.
We shall see. I mean, sometimes these things get a little heated. We now have 60 of 66 novels up on our grid. As always, we will post on our various social media platforms, which at this point are Twitter and Instagram. We really don't do Facebook anymore.
Yeah,
with apologies to those of you who might still be Facebookers.
No apologies to Facebook itself.
No apologies to Facebook, just to among those of you who might still prefer Facebook, for which we are not judging you, but we have made the decision not to partake of Facebook at all. We're choosing to remain on Twitter and Instagram. So head on over to at All About the Dame on Twitter or at All About Agatha on Instagram, and we will have posted before this episode drops the graph as it appears before this episode and then the graph as it appears after, so that if you want to nerd out with us, you can.
Yes.
This is one of my favorite episodes of the year, of course.
I know. And also, if you want to yell at either of us, if you email us, you're going to get a response from Kemper. And if you tweet at me, you're going to get a response from me. So
that is true. Yeah. The best way to reach Catherine is to tweet at the All About the Dame Twitter account. And then best way to reach me is to send an email to allaboutthedame@gmail.com. And you know what? I'm going to start things off actually with an email that we got from one of our longtime friends. And first, he's such a friend that what I'm going to actually do is plug a new book of his, which I think many of you will want to check out. This would be John Goddard, who published a fantastic book we've referenced before called Agatha Christie's Golden Age, an analysis of Poirot's Golden Age puzzles. Unfortunately, we were not aware of this book until we were almost done with the Poirot mysteries that he analyzes in that book, because he only does the quote unquote Golden Age, which is, as you know, roughly post World War I to World War II-ish. He doesn't do anything in the later 40s or the 50s or the 60s or the 70s, which is obviously what we're covering now. However, he came out with a second volume that was recently released called Agatha Christie's Golden Age, Volume 2, Miss Marple and the Other Golden Age Puzzles. So all of the non-Poirot material that Christie published in the 20s, 30s, and in the first half of the 40s is now analyzed in his just expert and granular detail. And he really geeks out just as we do as to the puzzle mysteries and what makes them tick and how they work or don't work. He has a revelation for almost every single novel that he analyzes. The first book was a delight. This one, I've only just begun it, quite honestly, but I'm already astounded and delighted. So we just encourage you all to support him and have a great time reading that book. And as I said, he actually sent us an email because he knew that our rankings episode was coming up. And I said, please share any thoughts you might have as a fellow expert and Christie scholar as to the state of our rankings, because we're going to be talking about it. It's apropos to bring this up at the beginning because we're going to start at the top, as we always do. And he has one bone to pick with our top 10. So before I get to his email, actually, I'm just going to read out what our top 10 is, because I am very pleased with it, with one potential exception. So here's the top 10 in descending order. Five Little Pigs, And Then There Were None, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, Endless Night, Crooked House, A Murder is Announced, Murder on the Orient Express, The Hollow, Death on the Nile, and The Pale Horse. Can we just live for a second among the loveliness and the brilliance, the effervescence of those titles, Catherine? What a wonderful world in which we live.
I mean, gosh, just to think that all of those were written by the same person is quite the thing, right, listeners? I mean, gosh, I'm happy to live in a world where all of those exist.
I'm making the genuflection motion where you also like bow with both of your palms toward the ground. Like it just cannot be overstated how much we admire Christie's writerly prowess for creating all of these mysteries. I believe our good friend Sophie Hannah once put it best when she said, it's weird. Like, it's really weird that she was able to write as much as she did, to write this many brilliant works of detective fiction. So the one title that is perhaps a miss is the one that Mr. Goddard identified in his email. So I'm now actually going to read the first part of his email out because I quite enjoyed it. I think you will too. I could quibble with a few of the rankings, but you both do such a great job that I'll limit myself to The Pale Horse. John actually goes on to mention Goodreads, which some of you may be familiar with, but you know, Goodreads is kind of like Yelp for books, where people can.
That's a real slam at Goodreads, Kemper.
I think that was just a slam at Yelp, Catherine. I mean, you know, Yelp provides a valid service. It's user reviews, right? People who get down and dirty in the muck using various businesses are not afraid to share their opinions.
I don't know. I think Yelp is filled with Karens.
Well, Goodreads is filled with many, many passionate readers who do love to rank actually books, or at least score books as we do. So until John's email, I never even thought to go to Goodreads to see what their Christie quote unquote rankings might look like. And they do in fact have a loose sort of ranking because each of the Christie novels has been given a certain number of stars on Goodreads. And there are many people on Goodreads who have read Christie. And it's really interesting because I'm not going to go through the whole list laboriously, of course, but it's very much what you would think. You know, the top book is And Then There Were None. The second book is Murder on the Orient Express. Murder of Roger Ackroyd is number 3, just as it is for us. We've got Death on the Nile, the ABC murders. Mysterious Affair at Styles is actually in the top 10, which I think is, you know, again, valid. It's the first one. A Murder is Announced. Five Little Pigs, you'll be relieved to hear, Catherine, is in number 9 of 10. So not bad. But as John points out, there is one book that is in our top 10, which is significantly lower in this Goodreads list. And that, of course, would be The Pale Horse. The Pale Horse is sitting at 51st place. There are a couple of short story collections that are scattered in and among there, but it is definitely within the bottom third of these rankings. And while I don't think that it deserves to be in the bottom third of the rankings, I do think actually that there is a case to be made that we have ranked it too high. And I think John actually gives a couple of really good reasons. He says that when we started our rankings conversation in that episode, we quoted John Curran, as we always do. What John Curran said was this was one of the strongest titles of the last 15 years of Christie's career. And as John Goddard says, the key point here is that he was comparing The Pale Horse with the other novels in her last 15 years. You know, I think that when we covered The Pale Horse, we were so excited to give a late career Christie as much credit as possible that we were a little more forgiving as to its faults and perhaps overhyping its positive attributes a little too much. It's one of those books that I remember being in the furor of my excitement over the book right when I had read it. But now looking back with a couple of months distance, I can fully acknowledge that I think we went a little high on this one.
Yes, agreed. And to that point, Kemper, you know what I want in its place.
Catherine has a mission here, folks, for this episode. It's really a fairly singular mission. The good news is that I have no problem with it because I actually am in agreement, even though I might not have her singular focus. Please, Catherine, share with us what you need to have happen on this episode.
I need Peril at End House back in the top 10.
Fair enough.
So I think what we're going to do is that we gave Peril at End House. Originally, we actually gave it more deductions, I believe, than the 4 that we currently have. And those are almost all attributable to the fact that it ends on such an incredibly sour note of anti-Semitism.
A false note of anti-Semitism, I would say, because it's supposed to be lighthearted and funny. That's what's so painful about it. It's supposed to be like, ha 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 ha, the end. Except
for the fact that it's not funny at all because what is going on there actually affects every single bit of the rest of the novel too.
Sure, it has a domino effect, but I think there's a farcical element to that too. If not for the anti-Semitism, it would be brilliantly crafted and I think like manipulative in the right way, sort of a final beat. But it's the anti-Semitism that just makes it fail and hard. And that's such a difficult way to end a book.
It really rough. And if it were not for that, Peril at End House already would probably be like number 6 or 7.
5th. Yeah, no, I mean, 5th. It would be basically in the, if not for the deductions, Peril at End House would be tied with Endless Night and Crooked House for somewhere 4th, 5th, or 6th place.
Yeah. So I think we're going to take one off for Peril at End House. And I think The Pale Horse, we went like real hog wild with those rankings. Credibility probably didn't have to be an 8.
No, and I want to give John Goddard some credit here because he had some very specific points to make about why we went too high for plot mechanics and plot credibility. You apparently made a comment on that episode where you said, you know, I don't know that there's a lot in this book that actually is talking about a murder for hire company, which I remember I kept harping on as the brilliant innovation in that book. And it is brilliant and it is interesting, but I don't know how much she actually sells it in the book. And
Agreed.
We find that being the issue in these later career books is that the concepts are usually still there for Christie, but the execution is a little off. And I think it's absolutely true that the execution is not as good as it was in a lot of her earlier books. And I think that affects both mechanics and credibility, which is why I agree with you. I agree with John Goddard. I think that 8s for mechanics and credibility are insanity. I actually think that they should at least be 7s, if not lower. And I also don't know that a 9 for setting and tone.
I would also say that seems a wee bit high to me.
I agree. Here's what I would do. I think I would drop down plot mechanics and plot credibility to 7 and 7 and drop down setting and tone to 8.
Yeah, I completely agree with you.
Okay. So that's going to knock it down to 32 points. The Pale Horse. I like that because it also puts it in a tie with a lot of books. And I'm very comfortable with it being among these books because these are some fantastic Christie books and they're hovering around that top third area. Like, again, I don't think that this book should be in the bottom third. I think The Pale Horse is actually a fantastic Christie. It just doesn't deserve to be in the top 10.
Yes. And I'm going to also shout out to our dear friend, Dr. Mark Aldridge, who definitely has DM'd me also arguing that The Pale Horse should not be in the top 10. So,
you know what? If John Goddard and Mark Aldridge are both advocating for that, that is very, very persuasive to me because those are some,
I think we were just
Christie
we were just very hype on it. I think when we were reading it, and I really like it still. But
I do too. I love the witchy stuff. And I think the murder for hire thing is really, really good. And I think she does it in such a Christie-ish way. Like there's so much to celebrate about that book, but like, let's celebrate it around spot like 22 or 23, not spot number 10. That just feels more appropriate. At this point, that is like a really, really good place to be within these rankings. So looking at what we gave 32 points, we've got Evil Under the Sun, 3-act tragedy, Appointment with Death, Lord Edgeworth Dies, Mrs. McGinty is Dead, The Body in the Library, 450 from Paddington, and Taken at the Flood. Wow, that is a lot of books. And those are some really, really fantastic books. I think it has to go somewhere around Mrs. McGinty is Dead. I think it should go below Lord Edgeworth Dies. I know you don't like Lord Edgeworth Dies as much as I do, Catherine.
I mean, my arch nemesis is in that book, Kemper.
I'd probably put it right below Lord Edgeworth Dies and right above Mrs. McGinty's Dead. So that would be like 23rd place.
Yeah, I think that sounds right.
Okay, so I'm putting The Pale Horse between Lord Edgeworth Dies and Mrs. McGinty's Dead. And now we agreed that we were going to lower the deductions for depictions stuck in their time on Peril at N House to 3 deductions. And to be clear, like not because we think they're any less stuck than we did before, but I think that relatively speaking, a 3 actually does feel right because we rarely have given 3. Like we gave 3 deductions for The Hollow, which is also a book that features some really difficult anti-Semitism. And I think it's on par with Peril at N House, actually. And like, that's meaningful because they're both really bad when it comes to depictions of anti-Semitism. But I just think a 4 is a little bunch.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So that means that Peril at N House now has 34 points, meaning we can put it above Murder at the Vicarage. It had formerly been below, but I am totally comfortable with Peril at N House being 1 tick above the Murder at the Vicarage.
Yeah, I love Murder at the Vicarage tremendously, but I think that is right.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be committed to keeping Murder at the Vicarage in 11th place, or certainly somewhere near there, even as we're adding, new titles. I doubt that we're going to have any titles breaking into our top 10. I mean, let's just speak openly. The only title where it might happen is Curtain.
Right.
I think, unless something else really surprises me, but this, I think, is a pretty locked in top 10.
Yeah, I think exciting. So.
What a great top 10. I mean, now that Peril at N House is in 10th there, I love that every single one of these titles is in the top 10. Like every single one of these titles being in the top 10 feels important to me, actually, for very different reasons. It's important that Murder on the Orient Express be in the top 10 because it's a really, really important part of the Christie oeuvre and it's brilliant and people love it so much, even though we don't really like it that much, or we at least didn't have as good a time as we thought we would rereading it. And we never really seemed to want to talk about it all that much, but it's important that it be in the top 10.
Yeah, no, it's important that it's there. It's just that it's one of those things that we just happen to never have any use for really in conversation about other books. So it's always a little bit incongruous to see it there. You know?
And in some ways, maybe that speaks to the strength of Murder on the Orient Express. It's an outlier book. I mean, and that goes to the Gonzo concept. The concept so overwhelms that book and makes it its own thing that there's just not that much else to say about it. Once you've said that, you're done. And like the book is powerful the first time you read it, but like, that's it, you know?
No, I totally know what you mean, because I mean, I think that our biggest problem with it, which was surprising, was that we did not enjoy rereading it. And it's just because like, you know what happens. There's not like a lot of layers to this. You know, Kemper, in some ways, I kind of wonder if that's part of why sometimes Christie gets a little bit unfairly interpreted by people who think that it's just a puzzle. Because in the case of Orient Express, it kind of is. I mean, a very brilliant one. But at the same time, the rest of this top 10 list, you can reread a bunch of times. And you're going to like keep unpacking things every single time you read them. And they're incredibly smart and emotional. And there's, I just think, so much depth to the rest of the top 10 that, I don't know, it didn't come across when we reread it. And I think that that's actually what strikes me repeatedly seeing it there. And it's, again, it's not because it's not brilliant. It is. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
I do. No, I do know what you mean. I think that's part of it. And I was actually, this thought just occurred to me because I'm also casting my eye at the next group of titles. And I'm going to draw a line between Murder on the Orient Express and one other title of hers, because I think that another issue that I have with Murder on the Orient Express is that the book is very much dominated by themes of justice. And obviously there's the extra legal ending there. There's a lot of textual chatter as opposed to subtextual preoccupation with justice. And I would argue that in almost every Christie, there is a lot of subtextual discussion. I think what she's doing in Murder on the Orient Express is that she's being very obvious about the kind of extrajudicial argument that she's making. And I actually think she does the exact same thing in Ordeal by Innocence. And Ordeal by Innocence is another one of these books that a lot of people point to as a quite good title of Christie's. And it's true. It is. There's a lot to celebrate about Ordeal by Innocence, just, you know, as a book in terms of all of these elements that we use when we rank. It's plot mechanics, it's plot credibility, the characters, et cetera, et cetera. But it's another one of these books that's very much obsessed on a surface level, on a textual level with themes of justice. And there's something about that, the fact that it's more textual rather than subtextual, that ultimately leaves me a little cold, because I will be honest with you, Ordeal by Innocence is another one of those books that before we started this podcast, I would have assumed that it would be in the top 10. And I esteem it, but I don't have as much affection for it as I do a lot of these other titles. I'm surprised by actually how little I think about it. And again, that's a relative statement. It's not one of my favorites, actually.
Yeah, well, I would also note that in the top 10, almost all of them involve extra legal justice.
They do. That's the thing. All of Christie's books do, but most of them are actually doing it in a really interesting and underhanded and sly and clever way.
Arguably Cricket House, right, has the ending that's the most jarring in what ends up happening, right?
And Peril at End House, right? I mean, and Death on the Nile. Death on the Nile and Peril at End House have very similar extrajudicial endings. And The Hollow actually does as well. I mean, obviously, all of these books that we're talking about may be spoiled in the course of this episode. So let's just say what it is. I mean, all of the murderers at the end of those books commit suicide, right? And are basically allowed to. Poirot allows them to.
Well, with the exception of Crooked House.
Yeah, no, I was talking about The Hollow, Death on the Nile, and Peril at End House.
Yes.
I mean, in all those books, Poirot essentially allows the murderer to commit suicide. In Crooked House, a child is murdered in a quote unquote merciful way, right? Because her
grandma crashes the car.
Yeah, and kills herself in the process, right? So it's a murder suicide. And talk about extrajudicial. I mean, And Then There Were None is steeped in notions of, extrajudicial justice.
It's the entire plot of the book. And Five Little Pigs, essentially, you might make the argument that depending on what happens to Elsa Greer, when she gets into her limousine surrounded by her furs at the end of the book, you might make an argument, given her final speech, that she's also off herself.
I think it's even worse than that. As she says, she's already dead. You're looking at a woman who is a zombie who is literally, it's like she gets entombed in that car.
Yeah.
She goes in the car and she's in a grave, and it's that stark. And that too is so powerful. That's what I mean. These are all such powerful evocations of extra legal justice. And in a way, Murder on the Orient Express and Ordeal by Innocence are anvilicious, if you'll forgive the word. It's like she's being her most obvious and least interesting in those books. I realize this is a shocking statement to make. Many of you will probably be howling at your iPhones or wherever you're listening to this podcast. How dare I denigrate these two wonderful Christie titles? I love them.
We're not denigrating them, but I just think in comparison to the others of these, they're less interesting.
They're less interesting. I totally agree. I mean, this is all by way of saying that I think Ordeal by Innocence, which is tied at 33 points with a number of titles, I actually would like to bump it down a couple of titles, just because I think After the Funeral is such a more interesting book, actually, and a better book than Ordeal by Innocence. I would say the same thing about Sad Cypress, and I think I might even say the same thing about Towards Zero, although that's controversial. Maybe Ordeal by Innocence should be right above Towards Zero.
I can agree with that. The thing about Towards Zero is that it's actually so brilliantly structured that it makes me really like it. But the problem is the ending is bonkers. So
yeah, it's actually, I think it might be one of her most elegant books. There's an elegance to the way it's written that is unusual. If you could almost apply aesthetics to the text of a book, it's the one that has the best symmetry and proportions, or one of the best symmetry and proportions among.
Well, I mean, I think that it actually deserves some comparison to our top two, which are Five Little Pigs and Then There Were None.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just that the ending is just, whoa.
It kind of falls off a cliff, which is almost an unintended pun, not really for that book. But yeah, it's not great at the end. I don't think that we need to move any of these around in terms of their scores, but if you're okay with it, I would just love to bump up After the Funeral and Sad Cypress, which are two books that I continue to adore.
Oh, we've loved Sad Cypress from the get-go. So yeah. I'm not as big of an After the Funeral fan as you are, but I'm okay with that too.
Miss Gilchrist, I just think about her on a regular basis.
I know you do mention her pretty regularly, dear listeners. So yeah, sometimes he'll just be randomly talking to me off mic and Miss Gilchrist will come up. It's totally true.
Really not an exaggeration. I think I literally did that yesterday.
I guarantee you did that yesterday.
She's a ladylike murderer. I mean, Miss Gilchrist. If we were ever going to do, and maybe we should at some point, we should just do a ranking of the murderers as opposed to the books. I would insist that Miss Gilchrist be in the top 10, if not the top 5.
We can do that episode.
Second only to Jane Wilkinson.
No.
Okay, so other than that little change, let me just read out now our titles in descending order from 11 through 20. We've got The Murder at the Vicarage, Cards on the Table, The ABC Murders, After the Funeral, Sad Cypress, Ordeal by Innocence, Towards Zero, Evil Under the Sun, 3-Act Tragedy, and Appointment with Death. That is at number 20. Again, what a world in which we live. I also would love to just be surrounded by all of these titles all the time. They're all absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, no, those are all great. And then the next group of them is also still really strong.
We're still in the top third. Our top third now, is eventually going to be up to 22. So I probably just should have included the next two titles. That would be Lord Edward Dies. Yes. And The Pale Horse. So The Pale Horse is still within the top third. Yeah, those are all great titles. I don't really have a problem with where any of those are currently ranked.
Nor do I. The next section is a little iffy to me.
Well, this is where we're getting close to Taken to the Flood, right? Which you had indicated you might want to...
I think it should be moved up.
Bump up a little bit?
I think it should be bumped above at least 450 from Paddington.
I completely agree with that. I don't understand why we put it below 450 from Paddington. That seems like madness.
Yeah, I think The Body in the Library is too important. And I actually really have affection for that book, to the point where I almost think it's low.
I know, but it's just not perfect.
No, it's not. But I really do care about it. I mean, we can maybe have that conversation later. But at a minimum, I think Taken at the Flood has to be above 450 from Paddington.
I think that's fair. And just to be clear, the next couple of titles we're talking about here. So after now 22, we're starting at 23 in descending order. We've got Mrs. McGinty's Dead, The Body in the Library, 450 from Paddington, and Taken at the Flood. That's 23 through 26. I agree. Let's flip Taken at the Flood and 450 from Paddington. Let's keep the other two where they are. I would almost say we could flip them, but funnily enough, we talk about Mrs. McGinty's Dead a lot. There was a lot of Mrs. McGinty's Dead reminiscence happening in Halloween Party, which we just covered. So that's part of it, but it's a really good one. I think that's another one that's an unsung Christie, but an important one in the canon, actually, and quite good.
Yeah. If it were me personally, I would put Taken at the Flood above Lord Edward Dies. But at the same time, I know that that's not going to fly with people. So we will leave that alone.
Lord Edward Dies is one of those, it's early 30s. It's Christie firing on all cylinders. And I'm sorry that Jane Wilkinson pulled the wool over your eyes, Catherine. I'm sorry that she fooled you. I know that you just can't come to terms with the fact that you were bested by Jane Wilkinson, but someday, maybe with a lot of therapy, you'll get over it.
You were just driving me to madness, aren't you? You're gaslighting me. Okay.
Wait,
Gosh, I don't like that book.
Catherine's adjusting her collar right now.
I know. No, it rubs me the wrong way. Well, I have some issues with 3-act tragedy too. I mean, it's ranked that high because it's very clever.
Yes. 3-act tragedy. Again, we're spoiling all this stuff, folks. 3-act tragedy, the dress rehearsal murder. It's brilliant. Yeah. And unlike Murder on the Orient Express, it's not just a one-trick pony. I mean, there's a lot to love about that book, including Mr. Satterthwaite.
Correct. And you know my love for Mr.
I think we might have I'm having deja vu. I feel like we had this exact conversation in our last rankings episode.
I think we did too. Where
you had it in for 3-act tragedy because you just don't like it that much. But I think that I clinched it with Mr. Satterthwaite and you were like, oh, fine. I know.
I'll just have to agree. Anytime you bring up Mr. Satterthwaite, you're just going to win me over. And, that's fine. This episode is brought to you by Best Fiends.
Catherine, we've been getting out and about a bit more these days, certainly more than in the recent past. And it's worth repeating that one of the perks of Best Fiends is that you can play it without an internet connection, meaning wherever you might find yourself, in a doctor's office with poor cell service and no Wi-Fi password, say, or in a plane, you can still play it.
Oh, absolutely. It's been really amazing to be able to take my relationship with Howie the Lizard out on the town, so to speak. Just the other day, we were canoodling for a few minutes while I was out and about running some errands, defeating slugs together, etc. That's a great thing about Best Fiends. You can play it for as long or as short of a time as you want. It's very adaptable, much like Howie, actually.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing more of this Catherine Howie canoodling in action.
You and me both.
So engage your brain with fun puzzles and collect tons of cute characters. Trust me, with over 100 million downloads, this 5-star rated mobile puzzle game is a must-play. Download Best Fiends free on the Apple App Store or Google Play. That's friends without the R. Best Fiends. So I'm going to read out now the next couple of titles until we get up to 33, because even though we don't have all 66 titles, we almost do. And that's basically going to represent our top half. So I think that's just a helpful way to look at it. So starting with number 27 in descending order, we've got Cat Among the Pigeons, Dead Man's Folly, The Sittaford Mystery, The Mysterious Affair at Styles, Sparkling Cyanide, They Do It with Mirrors, and A Caribbean Mystery.
This gets complicated to me right here.
This gets complicated to me too. And you know what? I'm just going to bring up something that's very important to me on this episode. I don't have exactly the same sort of overwhelming drive that Catherine did to put Peril at Henhouse in the top 10, but there is a title, this has come up before, there's a title that I think is ranked too low. You have a couple of these lower down as well, Catherine, which we'll get to.
Yes, we're going to get to at least one of them soon.
You scratch my back, I scratch yours.
Oh my gosh, we're doing it's like payola.
The corruption here. Oh God, someone call the authorities. And I actually have some support from a listener as well. And I even got his permission to read out his email on this episode. So hold on, because I'm about to.
You're about to do it on a book that I also don't like. So
I sure am. Okay. Here is what one of you wrote to me, and I was thrilled to read this, and I filed it away for this very episode. I really enjoy the constant banter between Kemper and Catherine over which book belongs on the bottom, Big Four or Secret of Chimneys, when we all know, fingers crossed, Postern of Fate will wind up last. We'll see. Well, I'm keeping an open mind. I also think you have my personal favorite Christie, Hercule Poirot's Christmas, as way too low on the list. It's my Christmas tradition to read the chapters on the days they occur, which makes Christmas Eve particularly chaotic since it is the largest section, and Christmas Eve is my busiest day of the season. I think the issue is that you rate particularly low in setting and tone for not being Christmassy enough. I disagree with this, as we have several scenes about Christmas and winter, including the first scene with Pilar and Stephen traveling on the train, Poirot complaining about the lack of central heating, etc. There are numerous incidents where it is mentioned that, quote, it doesn't feel like Christmas, end quote, and it is a shame about a murder happening at Christmas time. Plus, we have Poirot's theory about why Christmas sets the perfect conditions for a murder. One should also take into consideration what kind of family the Lees are. They are not the joyous family one usually sees depicted at Christmas, and they are only adults, so much of the traditional Christmas stuff is gone. So I think that our reader makes some good points. I think that we were a little too harsh on Hercule Poirot's Christmas as to setting and tone. I think that he is absolutely right. We gave it, Catherine, a 4.
I know. That's
crazy.
It's really low.
It's really low.
I'll agree.
That is a competent book. Here's what's really important to me. I think Hercule Poirot's Christmas, because it has one of Christie's best big concepts. Again, we're spoiling. The Policeman did it. And it's so well done. And it's so well hidden, I think. It needs to be in the top half. That's all I'm asking. Right now, it's sitting at 38. I need for it to at least go up to a 33. Which would require giving it really only a measly 2 points. And I think at the very least, the setting and tone should have a 6. Honestly, it should potentially have a 7, but I'm okay giving it 6 points.
Yeah, I would. You know what? I can stomach it. Also because I think it's probably, as reluctant as I am to say it, it's probably better than A Caribbean Mystery.
It's so much better than A Caribbean Mystery. Here's the thing. I actually think that
it actually might be better than They Do It with Mirrors, to be honest.
It's definitely better than They Do It with Mirrors. I think we should give it a 6 for setting and tone. And I actually think that we should give it a 7 for plot mechanics as opposed to a 6 for plot mechanics and a 6 for plot credibility. I think a 7 is totally warranted for that book.
All right. Because you let me put Peril at End House in the top 10, I will grant you this.
Okay, so that's giving it 30 points, which puts it in a tie with They Do It with Mirrors and Sparkling Cyanide and The Mysterious Affair at Styles. Clearly, The Mysterious Affair at Styles should be above Hercule Poirot's Christmas, but I'm going to be honest with you, Catherine. I think that this should be above Sparkling Cyanide also. I mean, come on.
No, I'm not going to grant you that much, but I'll grant you above They Do It with Mirrors.
We don't even like Sparkling Cyanide anymore. Sparkling Cyanide was also, like The Pale Horse, one of those books that we were in raptures over. I remember when we covered that book, we never talk about that book. That book has become a dud.
We don't really talk about Hercule Poirot's Christmas.
I talk about it all the time.
Well, yes, because you do.
And I talk about how brilliant that plot is. And we're going to be bringing up that plot again at some point in the future in an important way. If you grant me above Sparkling Cyanide, I promise I will shut up about Hercule Poirot's Christmas.
Okay, fine. Fine.
Yes. Okay. Oof. I'm working you hard here.
Yeah. Well, are you going to move up N or M for me then? Is the question.
Well, N for me too, honestly. I think we're actually in agreement on that one. All right. So Hercule Poirot's Christmas now has 30.
And you know that we're going to get to the one that you really don't want to move up and that I do. So
I know exactly which one you're talking about. And I am also actually okay with that too. I've made my peace with it, but we'll get there. All right, so Hercule Poirot's Christmas now has 30 points, and it is sitting in 31st place. Yes. Just underneath Mysterious Affair at Styles. Let me just read out the titles now from, I suppose, Taken at the Flood on down. And now we're just going to get into some titles below the second half. So we've now got Taken at the Flood and number 25th, then 450 from Paddington, Cat Among the Pigeons, Dead Man's Folly, The Sittaford Mystery, The Mysterious Affair at Styles, Hercule Poirot's Christmas, Sparkling Cyanide, They Do It with Mirrors, A Caribbean Mystery, and now moving along, A Pocket Full of Rye, The Secret Adversary, The Man in the Brown Suit, 1-2 Buckle My Shoe, N or M, and in 40th place, The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side. And I believe you already alluded to the fact that you would like to move up N or M, Catherine.
I would like to move up N or M. And I actually have one other question. Do you really think that Dead Man's Folly is better than The Sittaford Mystery?
I actually think that Dead Man's Folly, it's really funny. As I was reading that out, we really do have the same brain sometimes, especially as to Christie. I was thinking that one stuck out like a sore thumb. I think that it's too high by a couple of titles. I don't think Dead Man's Folly is better than The Mysterious Affair at Styles. Do you?
That's hard. I could see moving Dead Man's Folly under The Mysterious Affair at Styles so that it went Cat Among the Pigeons, Sittaford Mystery, Mysterious Affair at Styles, Dead Man's Folly.
You mean you don't want to move it underneath Hercule Poirot's Christmas? I'm pushing my luck, I realize. Yeah, I could agree to that. I think then what we have to do is that we have to lower it by 1 point, which is eminently doable.
The thing about Dead Man's Folly is it does a really good job. Like, we have 7s for series-long characters and setting and tone, and I think it deserves that.
No, I wouldn't lower those categories at all. We gave it 6s for plot mechanics and plot credibility. And I'll be honest, it's not her most brilliant book. I mean, we talked a lot about the fact that it was originally written as a novella, and it feels like a novella that had to get expanded out into a novel. But that doesn't even necessarily have to do with the mechanics and credibility. And we've seen how she used elements of the puzzle mystery in Dead Man's Folly time and time again in her later career. So I actually think it deserves points there. I think the ranking where we could easily lower it is in book specific characters. I think
give it a 5.
I think we could easily go to a 5. I'm very comfortable with that.
I think that's okay. Yeah.
Okay. So that's going to lower it to a 30. And then we're going to stick it in between The Mysterious Affair of Styles and Hercule Poirot's Christmas.
I mean, we still have immense affection for the Sittaford Mystery. So
I'm fine with it being where it is. I mean, I think it's in a good spot.
Yeah.
It's at 28th now. It might be a touch high for some people's taste, but I love it. So
yeah, I love it too.
Also that's one of the ones where she most brilliantly and most centrally uses the appearance of superstition so well. I actually, in a weird way, feel about the Sitterford mystery as I do Lord Edgeworth Dies. That is one of those like early 30s-ish Christie's where it just feels like fresh, and she was just at the top of her game and had so many other good books ahead of her. And I get like a rejuvenated feeling when I think about the Sitterford mystery.
Looking at it, I actually think that we probably did Setting and Tone too low on that.
For the Sitterford mystery? Mm-hmm. Yeah, when we gave it a 6.
Mm-hmm. I think that was too low.
Here's the thing, though. I actually really adore Cat Among the Pigeons as well.
I know. I think Cat Among the Pigeons is excellent. So
I think the Cat Among the Pigeons is better. I mean,
yeah, I think it is too. So, I'm not going to disagree with that. But I'm just looking at it, and I think that seems not like it was a fair score for.
Well, here's what I wouldn't be averse to doing. I could easily add a point to both the Sitterford mystery and Cat Among the Pigeons, thereby tying it with a lot of titles, but most importantly, 450 from Paddington, and bumping 450 from Paddington down 2 titles.
Oh, yeah. I'd be okay with that. Mm-hmm. I think that actually sounds right.
Yeah, it's 450 from Paddington is also a good title. It's a great Miss Marple. It has a lot to speak for it, but it has a lot of problems too.
Yes, it does.
It's a very flawed book. So, okay. We're going to give the Sitterford mystery a 7 for setting and tone. And we're going to give Cat Among the Pigeons. I would give series long characters a 5. There's not a lot of Poirot in it, and it's not the best Poirot book, but a 4 might be a touch low.
Yeah, I think especially looking at some of the other rankings on here. Yeah, I think it's a little low.
Okay. All right. So we now have Cat Among the Pigeons in 26th, the Sitterford mystery in 27th, 450 from Paddington in 28th. The Mysterious Affair at Styles in 29th. Dead Man's Folly is now sitting at 30th place. We have Hercule Poirot's Christmas at 31st. Sparkling Cyanide is in 32nd place. And They Do It with Mirrors is in 33rd. That is our quote unquote top half, given that that's up to 33. So let's now talk about our bottom half. I'm just going to read out the next 10 titles. So this will be 34th through 43rd place. A Caribbean Mystery, A Pocket Full of Rye, The Secret Adversary, The Man in the Brown Suit, 1-2 Buckle My Shoe, NRM, The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side, Death in the Clouds, Murder in Mesopotamia, and Third Girl.
Well, okay. NRM is 100% better than 1-2 Buckle My Shoe.
Agreed. I agree with that. But that might be it. It's not.
Yeah.
Is it, right? I mean, it's funny. I was kind of gunning hard for bumping NRM up as well, but
it's hard because it's kind of like, do you want to put it above The Man in the Brown Suit? Because
no,
I don't want to. No. So I think, and here's the funny thing. I like NRM much more than I like The Secret Adversary.
I do too. Actually.
So that's the really odd thing that's going on here.
Well, I think what we need to do is we need to add a point to NRM so that it's tying with those titles, and perhaps switch The Man in the Brown Suit and The Secret Adversary so that we have almost The Man in the Brown Suit, NRM, The Secret Adversary, and 1-2 Buckle My Shoe.
Yeah, that works.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because it's weird. The NRM should be the highest ranked Tommy and Tuppence. I think the issue is that we have a lot of affection for the thrillers in general because we love Christie. And at this point, we've lived in her world so much that there's a lot to delight in the thrillers. But it's the Anthony Barclay Cox point, right? As Francis Isles in The Guardian, when he said anyone can write a thriller, but only one person can write an Agatha Christie mystery. You just can't rank any of these thrillers higher than all of the puzzle mysteries that we just talked about. The only puzzle mysteries that go below are seriously and deeply flawed ones, which we'll get to. And they just can't go any higher than that. So like, there's not actually that much room for any of these thriller titles to go as much as we love them.
Right. Yeah, I think that that's right.
Okay. So how are we going to add a point to N or M?
Yeah.
You know what? I think that the series long characters
is an 8.
Is an 8. Yeah. Like easily an 8.
We gave fine. Secret Adversary a 9.
So now they're all sitting at 28 points, which is why we're just basically going to rejigger this whole tie here at 28 points. We still have A Pocket Full of Rye being the top title that gets 28 points, but then we're going to follow that with The Man in the Brown Suit, then NRM, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then The Secret Adversary. Mm-hmm. And then 1, 2, Buckle My Shoe. I'll be honest with you. I think there's an argument to be made that 1, 2, Buckle My Shoe should be above The Secret Adversary. But do you feel strongly that it should not?
I like that it's the first Tommy and Tuppence, so I would prefer to keep it above 1, 2, Buckle My Shoe.
It's just a little weird to me that NRM and The Secret Adversary are back to back, but I suppose that doesn't really matter. I mean, I think for different reasons, they're both hanging out at that spot. It's because NRM is the best Tommy and Tuppence, and it's a really good thriller. So it's the second ranked thriller behind podcast favorite, The Man in the Brown Suit, just behind it. And then we have Secret Adversary because that introduces Tommy and Tuppence, and it is a good early thriller in its own right, actually.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we're at the 40th spot here with The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side. So I'm just going to read through 40 to 50. And then we can do our bottom 10 of 51 through 60. How does that sound?
Okay.
All right. So we've got in 40th place, The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side, then Death in the Clouds, Murder in Mesopotamia, Third Girl, The Moving Finger, Dumb Witness, Murder is Easy, Halloween Party, By the Pricking of My Thumbs, At Bertram's Hotel, and The Murder on the Links. That is in 50th place. I know what title you are about to talk about, Catherine.
I would like Murder is Easy higher.
You would?
Not like I haven't mentioned it a million times, but yes, I would like it higher.
You have worn me down over the years. I still hold to the fact that I did not like that book as much as many other people did. And I think I gave some cogent reasons for my dislike on our podcast.
Well,
episode.
It's like, it goes into the category of like, okay, this has a bonkers ending.
Yes, it does. But, you know, hey, Toward Zero is pretty high.
Yeah, it's really high, but it has a very similar ending, to be totally honest, to Toward Zero.
It does. There are elements of that book. It's one of those books that for me also has one of the best openings that then also it falls off of two cliffs. It falls off of a cliff after that great opening with Lavinia Pinkerton, right? I mean, I still remember her name, for God's sake. And then it falls off a cliff at the end of the book too, and it just goes bananas. And there's just a lot that has that really nasty homophobic depiction of a character. There's a lot to dislike actually in this book, relatively speaking. But you know what? We've heard from so many of you who have so much affection for this book. And now
it's
that we're
really atmospheric, you can't get around the fact that the atmosphere of it is so well rendered, of the village and the estate and, you know, the creepy mountain hilltop thing.
No, it's true. You know what's funny? We often talk about Christie inserting Poirot into her books, and she thought that she ruined some of her books like Sad Cypress with Poirot. I actually think if she had just used Poirot in this book, which we know she didn't do because this book, I believe, came out in 1939 when she had just done that run of Poirot. So she was probably like, please, God, no, I cannot do it. I think this book would have been a lot better if it had been one of those Poirot goes to a village to investigate a weirdo murder books like Mrs. McGinty's Dead, like Halloween Party, like Taken at the Flood. I think it would have been better for it, actually, because I hate the detective Desoir in that book. He's such a doofus. He's so useless. The romance between him and the woman with the witch hair is so dumb. I don't know. God, I just have so many issues with this book. But fine, Catherine, what do you want to do?
Well, geez. On that note, like, okay. I think it should be above Third Girl.
Completely agree with you, actually. That said, like, I totally get it. Like, I totally get why this book needs to be higher. I completely agree with you.
And I'd also like to shout out to everybody. Murder Isn't Easy, which is our dear friend Carla Valentine's book that just came out. That's about the forensics of Agatha Christie, and everyone can buy it. The UK version's out, but they are shipping for free, I believe, from the UK. The US version does not come out until spring. It's wonderful. I read an early draft of it and just got my copy yesterday, actually. So...
And I will be getting my hot little hands on it as soon as possible. I cannot wait to read. I'll be honest with you. I think that Carla's book has a lot to do with me seeing the light on Bumping Up Murder is Easy. Because I'm like, okay, well, if Carla used it for her title, fine. It's a beloved title. I'll give in. I think we can easily goose one of these categories up because they're pretty low. What's your pleasure?
Well, I'll leave that to you. Because Ooh. I'm forcing the point, so you can make the decision.
Well, we just got to do 1 point, right? Because it needs to tie with Third Girl, so we can put it above Third Girl. I think that actually a 4 for plot mechanics is pretty low. You know, we gave it a 4 for plot mechanics, a 5 for plot credibility, a 4 for serious long characters because it has a cameo at best appearance of Superintendent Battle at the end, which we didn't love. And then a 5 for book specific characters and a 7 for setting and tone with 1.
Can I tell you which one actually that I would bump up?
Please.
Credibility. Because, which sounds funny given what happens in it, but I mean, again, we're talking about these books. It's all spoilers. Like if you're listening to this episode, you've been listening to us for a long time, but she goes insane. Well, she was insane to begin with. Sorry. I know that is a pejorative word. I guess my case would be that she had clearly mental illness and had a very traumatic thing happen to her with the breaking up of her engagement and the loss of her house, etc., and the sort of redo of the village. And, you know, she went off, I guess.
Yeah, I actually think that's a fair point because we've come back to that character a lot as to what she goes through and the motivation for her string of murders. And as difficult as it is to believe that she murdered the way she did to frame someone for said murder so that he would then die, you know, be humiliated and executed, even though the mechanisms for the murder are convoluted, you know,
which
in
is
the
why
world of Christie, it's still very believable and it's a powerful character construction. And that's why we keep on coming back to it. And I remember her too. I'll never forget the name Honoria. When someone says Honoria, I think hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, kind of, you know, like that's sort of what she's doing there. And she actually is doing it powerfully. And it should probably go a little bit to character as well. But I think you're right. Let's give her a little bit more credit in the plot credibility area. And
the mechanics are a little much.
Yes. But I'm more than okay with giving it a 6 for plot credibility. So that gives it a score of 25. That is then going to tie it with a bunch of titles with Murder in Mesopotamia and Third Girl. I think we want to put it between those two, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Because even though Murder in Mesopotamia has its big flaw, we talk about that one all the time. And I remain in awe of the locked room mystery that she constructed in Murder in Mesopotamia. I think it's really well done and really clever. And she didn't do locked room mysteries all that much. She did also do it in Hercule Poirot's Christmas, actually. I think it's actually much more elegant, though, in Murder in Mesopotamia, what the solution is. It's more surprising. It's a little bit contrived in Hercule Poirot's Christmas, but I like that. We get a locked room mystery in that one as well. I promised you I'd stop talking about Hercule Poirot's Christmas.
You did promise, but I mean, I guess
on my promise.
You did, and I... Yeah, you know, folks, this is what I have to deal with all of the time.
I mean, I'm going to also perhaps say something a little controversial. I think we came down really hard on the moving finger when we covered it. That is another one that many of you have contacted us about to say, gosh, I actually really love the moving finger. And I think it's one of the better Miss Marples. Why do you hate it so much? I know Laura Thompson really loves the moving finger.
I don't know that we hate the moving finger. I don't think that's fair.
Yeah, I actually think that's one of those novels where when we did our episode on it, we sounded really harsh on it and we ranked it pretty low. But my esteem for it has only grown since then, actually. I think it's a bit low. I mean, I certainly don't think it deserves to be below Third Girl. At the very least, I think those two need to flip. Because right now, Third Girl is in 44th place and the moving finger is in 45th. That seems crazy to me.
That's okay by me. I think Third Girl, I was really looking forward to rereading and then was like, ooh.
Yeah. No, the Third Girl is a very, very flawed book. I think it was a really interesting read.
It's interesting. Again, like when we say this stuff, this is not to say anything negative about it. It's just, it was not what I remembered it being.
I think Third Girl is actually very emblematic of late career Christie in kind of a good and a bad way, because there are a lot of late career Christies that are disasters, like true train wrecks. We haven't even really, as alluded to by our reader, who is the big Hercule Poirot's Christmas fan. I mean, we're expecting, that Postern of Fate is going to be kind of a nightmare. That's, how most people remember it. We'll see when we get there. But Third Girl, to me, has a lot of the problems that late career Christies do, even though it's not a total mess. Like, I think it's actually a very helpful stand-in almost for what she was doing in her later career, which is why it deserves to be on the lower end, even though it's not an abject failure. And it just feels to me like The Moving Finger should be above it, even if just one ranking above it. I know why we gave a 4 to series long characters, because there's barely any Miss Marple in The Moving Finger.
You want to move it up to 5?
Yeah. I mean, because we also get Mrs. Dane Calthrop and the Reverend in it. I think a 4
I'm okay. Harsh. I'm okay flipping it with Third Girl.
Okay. So The Moving Finger now has 25 points. That title will be in 44th place. Third Girl will be in 45th place. Dumb Witness is sitting in 46th place. I'm fine with that. I know there are a lot of you that like Dumb Witness a lot more than we do. I have no hate for Dumb Witness, but I'm also not losing sleep over Dumb Witness being in 46th place out of 60.
It's just, we'll just say what we have always said about it is it should have been a short story.
And it, of course, in fact, was a short story. John Curran published the short story version of Dumb Witness in Agatha Christie's Secret Notebooks, which we talked about in our episode for Dumb Witness. And I think this is another one, just like Dead Man's Folly, where you can tell she was expanding a short form story, and the expansion itself is a little awkward. And that's why we have all the repetition and the saggy middle, which, yes, we do get in other books, but I think it's particularly egregious in this one. And that really sours the read, despite all the doggy bits. I love dogs just as much as the next guy, but boy, that book is repetitive and a bit of a slog to get through, in our opinion. I know a lot of people have much more affection for it. Okay, so that's 46th place. Halloween Party, which we just covered, in 47th place. By the Pricking of My Thumbs in 48th place, which we also just covered. At Bertram's Hotel, which we also just covered, in 49th place. And then finally in 50th place now, we have The Murder on the Link. So let me just run down our bottom 10 at this point and see if we want to move any of these around. So this is going to be 51 through 60. We've got The Mystery of the Blue Train, The Clocks, Why Didn't They Ask Evans? The Seven Dials Mystery, Destination Unknown, Death Comes as the End, They Came to Baghdad, Hickory Dickory Dock, The Big Four, and in last place, The Secret of Chimneys at 60. I actually have something to suggest that I don't think I ever imagined myself doing, but so many of you have let us know how much affection you have for Death Comes as the End, that I would actually be okay flipping it with Destination Unknown, because I remember I was insistent that Destination Unknown be as high as possible when we covered it, because I thought that it was, even though really, really bad, that it had such a good opening, and it was like maybe one of those mid-career thrillers that was a little better than I was expecting it to be. But now that I have some distance, I don't really care about Destination Unknown. And at least Death Comes as the End, it's her ancient Egypt set novel. She's doing something interesting. There's a lot of fan affection for it. I still want that BBC adaptation that we were promised that never materialized, which makes me really sad. I would be okay at least flipping those two, because they're tied for 20 points right now.
That's a surprise. But
you hated Destination Unknown. I remember having to push hard to get Destination Unknown as quote unquote high as it is.
You did. I just didn't know that you had come around to Death Comes as the End.
This is what happens, Catherine. You opened the door with Murder is Easy. So now I'm just Mr. Let's just celebrate everything.
I mean, I hold what I said in our Christie Festival event, that I think it has a great clue in it. So I'm okay with that.
Okay, let's do that. It's not a big thing, but every single title matters, doesn't it? I mean, that is our
well, yeah, it's also like how you secretly have been like goosing the rankings for like years by secretly moving stuff up bit by bit by bit.
It's true. And I do like the fact that we have Why Didn't They Ask Evans or the Seven Dials mystery as the higher of the bad thrillers. That will annoy some people that I'm calling them that. But I know there are many of you that like either, if not both of those. And I think they do have a lot more charm than some of the seriously flawed thrillers, which would be Destination Unknown and especially They Came to Baghdad. I really disliked They Came to Baghdad. That was one of the worst reading experiences. I mean, so is Death Comes as the End, to be perfectly honest, but I've forgotten about that more. I have not forgotten how much I loathed reading They Came to Baghdad. It was really hard to get through.
I actually really like Why Didn't They Ask Evans?
Comparatively, yeah. It's in the 30s, right?
Well, but here's the thing. I like Why Didn't They Ask Evans significantly more than, let's see, at least like 5 titles above it.
It's true, but but that's the thriller versus puzzle mystery issue. Like, I think it's really hard to put Why Didn't They Ask Evans above the Murder on the Links, even though I have more affection for Why Didn't They Ask Evans, like a ton more than I do for Murder on the Links.
Why Didn't They Ask Evans? I would just like hand to somebody if they asked, because I'd be like, oh yeah, it's really charming.
But I would have to make the caveat that it kind of doesn't make sense and that you'll be bewildered as you're reading because it's a bit of a mess.
Well, yeah, unless you like people randomly falling off cliffs, having random friends in garages, going on some bizarre cross-country adventure. Yeah. Yeah, it does not make a lot of sense, but, you know, it has its charms to it.
Indeed.
And so, yeah. And then the only other thing is we always come back to the fact that I'm not sure that The Secret of Chimneys is that bad.
You know what I think we're going to have to do, Catherine? I'm just going to
reread it, which is going to...
No. We will, because we always joke about rereading Secret of Chimneys, but here's what I think we're going to have to do before the end of the podcast. We're going to have to conduct some sort of a poll, which we could either do on Twitter or through email, maybe both, I don't know, and ask people to vote for which book we should revisit before we completely lock in our rankings. Like, which book have we gotten the most wrong? And I would be curious if there's some sort of a coalescing effect around one title. And I would be totally willing to read whatever that book is. I don't think it's going to be The Secret of Chimneys. I don't think there's a lot of people who are gunning for The Secret of Chimneys as a better book than we think it is. But maybe.
No, I think actually it's, especially because they're like in exactly the same spot. I think it's going to be some combination of The Moving Finger, Dumb Witness, and Murder is Easy.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
I think so too. But I would be willing to do that. Let's like take our joke and make it real. Like, I think it might be a little bit of a waste of time to read The Secret of Chimneys, but rereading one of these that maybe enough people feel we got wrong, who also think about this stuff as much as we do, our fellow fanatics.
There are people who like The Big Four. I just think that it's problematic.
I'm actually one of them. I mean, let's not forget, if it weren't for me, The Big Four would be the lowest ranked. You definitely wanted to put The Big Four below The Secret of Chimneys. I actually kind of like The Big Four. Yeah,
I know you do. I mean, it's just like, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's bordering on incoherent.
It's a Frankenstein's monster of a book. I mean, it's literally stitched, short stories stitched together. It's the one book whose provenance is a little uncertain as to, did Agatha Christie do 100% of the work that went into this book? I mean, on no other book do we even ever have that question. You might have questions as to who inspired her in certain titles, but that one we're not totally sure about because it was a crazy time in her life. But even so, I think there's a lot of charm in the same way that Why Didn't They Ask Evans is charming, even though it's bananas. I feel that way about The Big Four. And I think a lot of other people do too. I don't feel that way because it's a Poirot. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't make it doesn't make sense that it's a Poirot novel. It just doesn't. It's Poirot as an action hero. He's like jumping off trains. He's got like cigarette darts, right? Yeah, he does. A mountain explodes.
Oh,
We've got Vera
man.
Rosikoff.
Well, we do have Vera Rosikoff, which I always will appreciate, but at the same time, just ugh. No,
I think I think those titles can stand, or other than that little change with Death Comes as the End and Destination Unknown. I'm comfortable with that. We're going to be revisiting the lower part of our rankings. This is the part that's going to change the most, I think, with the 6 books we've yet to read, because let's be honest, I think we've got a couple of relative clunkers ahead of us, don't we?
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, some of the ones that I think that we were really looking forward to, like, I think we were both looking really forward to reading, or rather rereading, By the Pricking of My Thumbs and At Bertram's Hotel.
Mm-hmm.
And
those were disappointing.
Yeah. And so that was a little rough. Again, as I said, when you go back and look at something like Murder is Easy. I mean, I like Murder is Easy better than a number of books that we still have ranked above it.
Yeah. But, liking something and having affection for it isn't necessarily the same as what we're
it's not.
for here in our
it's
rankings.
Not. No, we're trying to be at least moderately objective. But I think it's in pretty good order at this point. I don't really see the top 10 changing, as we said earlier.
No, I mean, just to be clear, the titles we have left are Passenger to Frankfurt, Nemesis, Elephants Can Remember, Postern of Fate, Curtain, and Sleeping Murder. And I think realistically, Curtain is the only one of those that is probably going to get ranked pretty high.
Yeah, but I think, you guys will perhaps remember, I've never read Curtain.
Very shocking.
Well, it's not shocking. Here's the thing. I know exactly what happens, and it was not something that I wanted to read. So I never read it.
Fair enough. But yeah, I think before that, Passenger to Frankfurt will be our last thriller. I don't see that one getting ranked super high. Nemesis, I'm actually really excited for because it's got some problems. It's got some depiction stuck in their time problems, but it's really and truly the last Miss Marple because it's the last Miss Marple that she wrote. And I think it very much feels like that because Miss Marple is super, super old in it. You can really see that she has been aging slowly through the 60s.
I think that one, if memory serves, might require a trigger warning.
Yeah, there's some really problematic stuff in Nemesis, but that will be an interesting read. Elephants Can Remember, the last Poirot that she wrote. I have no memory of reading that book, but I'm sure I did. I couldn't even tell you what it's about, actually, but I think it's a bit rough as the final Poirot.
I seem to recall that. So,
and then we have Postern of Fate, our final Tommy and Tuppence. And I do remember reading that actually and just being bewildered by it. So that will be an interesting reread. And then we'll have our 2 books from the vault, which will be very interesting, Curtain and then Sleeping Murder. I'm really, really looking forward to those. And it's nice that we have those 2 Christies that she wrote earlier to end on.
Yeah, I will tell you, I don't totally remember the details of Sleeping Murder.
Oh, I do. For some reason, I really remember Sleeping Murder. I think I also really remember the Joan Hickson adaptation.
I do remember that. Yeah. But I think I even have a copy sitting around here someplace of Sleeping Murder. But yeah, I'll be interested for both of those. Curtain's going to just pain me.
I know. And we, just so you know, we'll probably be slowing down the rate at which we put out those novel-based episodes a little bit, just because we have a lot of other, we have our usual short story episodes that we still are doing because we still have more of the mystery short stories to get through, thankfully. And we have a lot of interviews and other content that we want to share with you. So
so this is not ending. No, this is not ending tomorrow. Nope. And so those of you who keep saying, "Oh, you only have 6 books left," yes, we do. But at the same time, it's not going to be over in 6 months. We're probably just not going to do a novel episode a month. We're going to spread the rest of the novels out a little bit.
spread the wealth. And this is my segue into our closing remarks. But if you really are itching for more content from us, we do, of course, have our Patreon site where we do bonus Christie material and non-Christie material within the mystery genre. We do movies. We do all sorts of stuff there. Catherine tells ghost stories. I know I already teased that, but believe me, it's worth teasing again because it's really just not to be believed. But
hey, thanks a lot. I did it in the most rational possible way. So
it's actually a really powerful ghost story. I mean, it's actually really hard to listen to and not believe it. It's quite a good ghost story. I mean that earnestly. I'm not joking. It's really, really good.
Well, thank you, because I was feeling vaguely offended given that I deliberately said I don't believe in ghosts.
True. This is a ghost story from someone who doesn't believe in ghosts, but who very clearly had an experience with something.
I know. And there was like
existence.
I know. And fire crackling, we got some stuff going on over there, and some of you have asked us for some additional content about other major queens of crime. And I gotta say, I think, Kemper, we might be picking up some PD James.
We absolutely are. Our latest Patreon episode, which comes out today, it actually dropped at the same time this episode did, was about Cover Her Face. Speaking of sleeping murder.
I know.
Since Cover Her Face was what Christie originally titled it. And then PD James swooped in there with her first Adam Dalgleish and used up that title. Poor Agatha.
Yeah, a reference to the Duchess of Malfi.
Yep, it's a great title. So yeah, we covered the first of the Adam Dalgleish novels. And I adore PD James, but I had never read it before. So it was extremely interesting to read that. And yeah, we've been hearing that from a lot of you. So we're thrilled to cover Christie Plus. That's over on www.patreon.com/allaboutagatha. And for our next episode, this is extremely exciting. We have another interview coming up, and this is with someone who is truly a friend of the podcast, isn't he, Catherine?
Yes, absolutely. Back in our very early days, I know a number of you found us, but he also did, and he wrote a very kind review of us early on. And he also wrote quite a very good novel.
He did. The novel in question, which we will be talking with him about, is The Savage Kind. It is a noir, but it is so much more than a noir, actually. Really, really interesting, genre-bending, other things bending mystery novel. This was a very thoughtful conversation with a very thoughtful writer who created just a really fascinating mystery. And I think as Uber mystery fans, many, many of you are going to really enjoy this. So perhaps we should also say his name. His name is John Copenhaver. And again, the book is The Savage Kind. It is out now, in case you would like to check it out before that episode, or perhaps you'll be inspired by the episode in which we managed somehow not to spoil anything too major.
I know. And by the way, it's the first in a trilogy.
Indeed. So we have a lot more from Mr. Copenhaver, and I, for one, am a big fan and do appreciate how he is an old school, longtime fan of the podcast. And of course, we were able to geek out over Agatha Christie as well. I know you would expect nothing less from us. So that will be next time. As we mentioned, you can always email me, Kemper, at allaboutthedame@gmail.com. You can tweet at Catherine either at our official account, which is at All About the Dame, or her personal account. She doesn't mind getting tweets there either. That's at Brobcat. Tweet at her left and right, just all the time. She loves it.
I basically just live on Twitter. So, I don't that whole lockdown thing, Kemper. It just really made me be like, oh yeah, my outside is now Twitter.
Catherine's basically just like a bot that has a Clara Bow cosplay outfit on and just like with like mechanical arms that are like typing tweets that go out, every now and then. That's what she's been reduced to.
Oh yeah, no, I do like a jazz hands, routine in my house, and then tweet something. And
you could also find us on Instagram at All About Agatha, where you can find these grids as well. And we would, of course, love to hear from you, however you'd like to get in touch with us. Or if you don't want to get in touch with us, you just want to leave us a rating or a review, that is a very helpful way to make contact. So please do that wherever you're listening to this podcast. Really helps us out. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Have you made the switch to Knix? Millions of women have made the switch to the revolutionary period underwear from Knix. That's Knix. Period panties from Knix are like no other, making them the #1 leak-proof underwear brand in North America. They're comfy, stylish, and absorbent, perfect for period protection from your lightest to your heaviest days. They look, feel, and machine wash just like regular underwear, but feature incognito protection that has you covered. You can shop sizes from extra small to 4XL. Choose from all kinds of colors, prints, and different styles, from bikinis to boy shorts, thongs to high-rise. You've got to try Knix. See why millions are ditching disposable, wasteful period products and have switched to Knix. Go to knix.com and get 15% off with promo code TRY15. That's knix.com, promo code TRY15 for 15% off life-changing period underwear. That's knix.com.